I'm from Kaduna State. Yesterday was a day of great privilege, and we thank the President and the Executive for laying the budget. Mr. Speaker, a lot of the things have been said already. I'll try to stick to time as quickly as possible by focusing on what I think is important. Recurrent capital is what is being discussed. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask again that this House remembers to compel the Executive to implement the oversight report. That's one. Two, we need to cut down on costs. Mr. Speaker, as you rightly heard, the recurrent of various budgets...
Members need to be in this room to vote on this particular bill. So for those who are moving around, please sit to make sure you contribute in voting for this.
Can I go on, sir? Sir, the recurrent issue is in every budget, even a young person like myself. We budget for vehicles every year. We budget for utensils every year. So what I would like us to do, sir, to open more revenues or block loopholes, is to look at all these ministries that are bringing their budgets. If they bought vehicles last year, please, they should just relax now. Vehicles do not expire. These are the little things, Mr. Speaker, that unless we start looking at them, the loopholes we talk about will not come out. I want to thank the leadership for sessions like this and other experienced members. It's a learning opportunity. But on this, the oversight report, sir, should be implemented. It is key. That is one. The second and most important thing to me, since I was I'm still a young man, since I was a boy, budgets every year come with new computers, new furniture. These things don't expire, sir. We should cut them out totally. We can't be asking Nigerians. We can't have a tax reform bill that could shape the fiscal shape of this country. Well, as leaders, we are not cutting anything. So I urge the chairman, I'm honored, sir, that I chair a committee that has CBN, but my budget is not on here. But committee chairman that are more experienced than myself should look into this. Nigerians are tired of every agency buying fork and knife every year. We should show them we are serious and do these drastic cuts. I really trust the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and I just thought to raise this issue. It's an opportunity to speak, and may God continue to guide us to do what is necessary for our people. Thank you, sir.
The Deputy Chairman of Appropriation, they are here making notes. And I've been watching them, and I'm also making notes, because we will also go through the work done by Appropriation to see if all these debates happening here and issues being raised here, we are captured. Because it's not garbage in, garbage out. Though that budget with good intention from Mr. President must be fine-tuned to reflect actually what he wanted to achieve by the time he conceptualized it. The floor is now yielded to my...
Appreciating your kind of leadership that culminated into the smooth process of budget presentation by the Executive yesterday. And let me equally use this opportunity to appreciate my colleagues who demonstrated maturity in all forms of ramification that saw us through the budget presentation by the Executive. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, in the wisdom of the Executive, they had some times ago renamed the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs to Ministry of Regional Development. I want to draw the attention of the Parliament and, of course, the Executive that Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs is still captured in the budget proposal of 2025, and it should be noted for proper correction. Having also said that, Mr. Speaker, let me thank and appreciate the Executive for allocating 4.91 trillion naira for security and defense, being still the one of the largest line items that has been taken by the budget of 2025 proposal. But I will understand with the executive, because we live in times that technology is changing, and the executive, in their wisdom to deploy technology in order to nip, if not permanently in the bud, our security challenges in our country, the parliament should really commend, and I stand to commend the executive. And I equally throw it as a challenge to the parliament, that we should equally make sure that the deliverables expected by the introduction of this technology culminate into the ambitious proposition by the executive that they are going to ramp up the crude oil production to over 2 million barrels per day. And of course, our farmers will have a leeway to go to the farm and till. Thank you. Let me end by, in less than 10 seconds, by saying that the capital expenditure of the budget has been placed at 14.8 trillion. And if you look at also the recurrent expenditure, which is non-debt, of 14.1 trillion, they are almost at par. And in a country that is developing, I think we should pay more emphasis on our capital expenditure, which will gradually ramp up our nation from being a developing nation to a developed nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues.
Sometimes the internet is making Honorable Mikey feel too comfortable. Video calls and others. Mr. Speaker, my name is Yusuf Adam Gagdi. I represent Panshinkanke Kanam Federal Constituency. I'm from Plateau State. Mr. Speaker, not part of my 2 minutes. It's better to be a legal lover boy than illegal lover boy. Mikey knows what I'm talking about. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that this budget talks about restoration, securing peace, rebuilding prosperity. Mr. Speaker, if there have ever been a presentation that is gearing toward my expectation as a parliament, is a presentation made by Mr. President yesterday. A budget that prioritizes 4 key sectors that have correlation with the mandate of the parliament, making laws for peace, order, and good governance. Mr. Speaker, prioritizing welfare of the citizens and their own security. This budget of restoration, securing peace, building prosperity, really speak to the provision of the Constitution that gave parliamentary powers to Parliament in that regard. What are those 4 key sectors, Mr. Speaker? Defense have the highest allocation. Budget that prioritizes infrastructure, which is the hallmark of any meaningful development. Mr. Speaker, budget that prioritizes education, looking at the number of uneducated persons, illiteracy level and literacy level in Nigeria, looking at our educational infrastructures, budget that prioritizes making our education work. Mr. Speaker, welfare of the citizen, budget that talk about the health. These are the 4 sectors that Mr. President concentrated on and prioritizes it. Mr. Speaker, it has been long that Parliament have been questioning, trying to have a budget that don't give its strength to debt servicing. If we have a budget that have a 34.8 expected revenue and a deficit of 13%, 13 trillion, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President poses yesterday when he was talking about the deficit, when he was talking about the borrowing aspect of the budget to fund the 2025 budget, he poses and ponder and said to Nigerians that this have to stop. It means that even the borrowing component of the budget, Mr. President, is not happy with it. And we are working toward ensuring that we have a budget that will not dedicate our commitment and energy to servicing debt. Mr. Speaker, in my mind and in my own study and understanding of this budget, Mr. President have done justice to it. The only thing that I will conclude, Mr. Speaker, my 1 minute is this. We must do our oversight function to the best of our ability. Mr. Speaker, is not about the executive performance. The success or failure of any budget implementation lies in the ability of the Parliament to hold executive arm of government to accountable of taxpayers' money that have been appropriated to them. So I call on Mr. Speaker and the members of the House of Representatives, if this budget fail, very beautiful document presented to us by Mr. President fail, we, the Parliament, have failed in discharging our responsibility by holding executive to accountable. The budget is even too small. Considering the exchange rate capacity, if wishes were horses, let's interrogate the budget very well and see other aspects that value should be added to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the 2 minutes to speak.
Kindly take your seat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues. I very most humbly rise to speak on the 2025 appropriation. There is no doubt that our president was optimistic in the 2025 appropriation presentation. I also agree with those who have contributed that if the budget is implemented the way it is presented, that it portends something good for our country. But then we should not lose sight of the fact that this is a projection, and so the major questions we should ask are whether these projections are realizable and not to sweep it under the carpet that if it is realized. And for it to be realizable, we must look at indices that are on ground. As laudable as the budget may appear, but it also appears that our indices are not completely correct. And so it's not uhuru yet for us as a country. Now, if we take the specifics, which everybody has talked about here, some dancing over it, that we expect a reduction in inflation rate from 36.9 to 15%. That is too ambitious, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues. I don't see how we can achieve that. Even where we achieve the issues of security in 2025, does it follow that immediately the same year that we'll also achieve food security? The answer is completely no. If we achieve security in 2025, we expect fundamental improvement in food security perhaps the following year. But to continue to budget that we are going to achieve security for the country this 2025 and the same 2025 that we're also going to achieve food security is self-deceit. Now, if you also look at the provision for security, which is better than what we have provided before, and look at how much we have paid for ransom within 1 year, you will find out that merely what we are budgeting, it's just 50% more than what we have paid for ransom within the year. The implication is that we are still far from achieving it. As good as it may appear, the budget for security will not take us to the promised land. The revenue target, which we have also projected, is 36.36. And if you also look at the budget, you find out that the revenue sources remain the same, from oil, customs, taxes, and other duties that will be paid by citizens. My prayer and concern is that in achieving this revenue target, let us not overtax our people again. And so this revenue target of 36 might also be overambitious. We should be talking about expanding our sources of revenue. We should be talking about non-oil sector development for the country to earn more. And we should also be talking about, rather than increasing tax, but expanding the tax net. So I also have issues with this target. And then the budget deficit is another source of worry. The deficit still appears to be high. And so I do not see how every Nigerian in 2025 will not go to bed in an empty stomach with this kind of deficit in the budget. It is not possible. That was what Mr. President told us. We also look at the exchange rate. It is projected that we will have an exchange rate of 1,500 per dollar. How are we going to achieve that? Today we are talking about free market, that the exchange rate will be fixed by forces, economic forces. Yes, we ought to plan, but I think that we should look at those economic forces. We are dovetailing between 1,700 and 1,650. What are the things that will improve?
Leader, please can you quickly round up? You know, we have only 2 minutes per...
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking for the minority, sir.
No, but you cannot speak beyond the 2 minutes because we don't have 2 rules. The rule is for everyone.
Thank
2
you, sir.
minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I like what I was saying is that the 1,500 exchange rate target, it's also not in line with reality. Now, the area of attention is said to be defense and security, infrastructure, education, and health. My question is, what about human capital development, which is very, very necessary? So I pray that in looking at this budget, honorable colleagues, before we finally pass this budget, we need to capture human capital development as part of our priority as a nation for 2025.
Please, whatever you are unable to speak on, pass the rest to any of our other members who will be given the opportunity to, so that he can continue from where he stopped.
Thank you, sir. Finally, let me just add that there is need for us to consider environmental sustainability. We cannot be planning on an increased daily output in the crude sector, which is the mainstay of the country, and then we also ignore environmental sustainability. We cannot also be planning on that high output without considering the corroded equipment that we still use as a nation, without considering the issue of oil theft, which is still there. So, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, in summary, what I'm still saying is that the budget we have received might appear very beautiful in its outlook, but there is much more for us to do as a nation. I still see it as the same document that we sit here every year to look at and pass. But it behoves us as parliamentarians to take a deep look into the budget and begin to look at those areas that we need to alter without just standing to dance and rejoice over the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader.